Hiya, Year 9. This is for the 3B textbook for chapter 9D on the maps and scale drawings. So the chapter starts off with a picture of an elephant and describing that real life distances can be reduced by a proportion using the scale. Okay, so if you want to draw a picture of an elephant, it's really difficult to draw it with the real dimensions that it has, so you have to scale it down. Okay, so this shows you that for your, let's say, scale drawing, and then you also have your real life. Okay, so if you start with your scale drawing, that is, so in the textbook you're going to do it 3.5 centimeters, and in real life that's 350 centimeters. Okay, so how have you got from there to there? Well, you've multiplied it by 100. So that means that to get from 3.5, you multiply by 100 to get to 350. So that means that our scale for this one is 1 to 100. Okay, because in real life, it is 100 times bigger. So for every 1 centimetre in our scale drawing, that actually means 100 centimetres. Okay, so that was just the basics of what a scale drawing actually is. Okay, so maybe more of a real, when you would see a scale more on a real world example, so day to day, that'll be on a map. So a scale on your map could be 1 to 50,000, 1 to 25,000. They're the two most common ones that you'll see, but it could be anything. In this example, you're asked to use the scale 1 to 50,000, okay? So part A asks you to find the distance between Calvert and Stony Middleton. On the map is 2 centimeters. So Calvert to Stony Middleton is 2 centimeters. Okay, so we always use our titles on our map and in the real world. Okay, so on our map we know that it's going to be 2 centimeters. And we know that in the real world it's 50,000 times bigger. Okay, so if we have 50,000 times bigger, that means when we're going from our map into the real world, that means we multiply by 50,000. Yeah, so we grab our calculator, 2 multiplied by 50,000. Yeah, so we know that we have 10 that means we know we have 100,000 for that one. Okay. We then are going to have a look at what that actually is. So we don't usually measure things that are that big in centimeters. So we've gone from 2 centimeters, we multiply it by 50,000. That is now 100,000 centimeters. So we haven't changed any units yet. So to go from 100,000 centimeters, that means that's going to give us 1,000 meters, because we divide by 100 to get from centimeters to meters. And then we're going to divide this by 1,000, so that's going to give us 1 kilometer. Okay, so to go from meters into kilometers, you divide by 1,000. Okay, that's just a bit of a recap from last year. So for the second question, it asks, the second part of the question, sorry, it asks for the distance between Baslow and Stony Middleton. So the real life distance for that is 4.25 kilometres. Our scale is still 1 to 50,000. So we're going to have a look at our map distance, because that's what we're going to try and figure out. And we have a real world distance. Okay, so we're given the real world distance in the question, so that's 4.25 kilometres. And we need to know what this is in centimetres. Okay, so we know that for every 1 centimetre we have in the map, that is actually 50,000 centimetres in real life. So we need to convert anything that we're dealing with into centimetres. So we start with multiplying this by 1,000 to get from kilometres into metres. That's going to be 4,250 meters. Okay. We then need to multiply that by 100 to convert it into centimeters. Try not to do this all in one step. It's much easier if you just do it in two separate ones. So we end up with 425,000 centimeters. Okay. We're then going from our real world back into the map. So if we start with 425,000 centimeters, and we know that that is 50,000 times bigger than our map, that means we need to divide by, to make it smaller, too many zeros, 50,000. Okay, so if we grab our calculator, that's going to be 425,000 divided by 50,000, and that's going to give you 17.8. Sorry, 8.5 centimeters. Okay, so that is the scale down drawing for your map. So that distance would be 8.5 centimeters on your map. So an extra example with different scales, just a quick one. If we had a scale of 1 to 10,000, which is quite uncommon, what does 5 centimeters represent? Okay, so we start with our headings again. So we've got map and we've got our real world. So we know that on our map we have 5 centimeters, and what does that represent in the real world? Okay, so our scale for this one is 1 to 10,000. So we know that for every 5 centimeters we have 10,000 centimeters really. For every 1 centimeter we have 10,000 centimeters. So if we've got 5 of them, we just multiply that by 5. So we end up with 50,000 centimeters. And let's convert that into meters. So we divide that by 100 to get it into meters. And then we're going to divide that by 1,000 to get that into kilometers. Okay, so 500 divided by 1,000 is going to give you 0.5 kilometers. Okay, and then similar thing again, what's the distance that represents 5 kilometers on the map? Okay, so if we start with our headings again, so we've got our map and we've got the real world. If we start with 4 kilometers, again, we need to convert that into, sorry, I've written 5 here, the question says 4. If we start with 4 kilometers, we need to convert this into centimeters. So we've got 4,000 meters by multiplying by 1,000, and then we'll have 400,000 centimeters. Okay, we're then going back into our map. So if we start with our real world, we're going to divide by 1,000 because it's going to get smaller in our map. So we do 400,000 divided by 10,000, so that's going to give you 40 centimeters. Okay, so still a really large thing to draw on a map, but maps can get quite big, and it's a lot easier than drawing out a real life full scale drawing. Okay.